Welcome to another edition of I Am AAPC. Today we have Pam Brooks with us, who is featured as a member of the month in our May 2022 issue of Healthcare Business Monthly. Pam, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you, Alex? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. I'm excited to learn more about your history and career in the healthcare field. And I know we've talked at past conferences, and I know you've been a member of the National Advisory Board, so you have a long history with AAPC. But before we get to there, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you fell into the career of medical coding and the business side of healthcare?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And fall into it is really an apt phrase. My first career choice was actually fashion. When I left high school, and a really long time ago, I went to a program that was a fashion merchandising program where I did a little bit of design, display, actually did some modeling. And it sounded like an awesome idea and a lot of fun. But then, you may know that I'm originally from Maine, live in Maine, and Maine is not exactly the fashion capital of the world. So although there was work in retail, it wasn't very exciting. And so I did it for a little while. I didn't enjoy working nights, holidays, weekends. I wanted kind of a regular life. So I actually went to work for a factory, and I worked in a factory for 8 years. And I got to say, one of the things that I learned in that kind of a work environment was how to be, what's the word when you try to streamline things. I was much more efficient, I guess, with my actions. And so when I got into production coding, I did extremely well because I was able to move from one case to the next, with that mindset in place. I got into healthcare after the birth of my boys. My oldest one was quite premature, and I ended up having to kind of duke it out with the insurance companies in order to get bills paid and figure out whose insurance was primary and secondary. And it was very interesting to me, and I kind of stored that in the back of my head for a while. Once my kids were a little bit older and I'd had about all I could have of Barney and Mr. Rogers on TV, I decided, I'd really like to go back to work. At the time, I couldn't get back into the factory that I had worked in, and I didn't even think I really wanted to do that anymore. So I looked in the paper and said, gee, I wonder what kind of jobs are out there. And one that I saw quite frequently was for medical assistant. And I thought, healthcare, that might be interesting. It's recession proof. People get sick, and, maybe that would be for me. So what I did was to sign up for a 2-year program at a local community college with the thought perhaps of becoming a medical assistant. Well, I learned really early on that the idea of touching people wasn't really for me. And so I found that I really liked the back end, the business end, the insurance, the practice management, that sort of thing. And so I switched my major from medical assistant to medical office management, was lucky enough while I was still in school to get a job in a family therapy practice where I really got my teeth into billing and some coding, accounts receivable, collections, front desk. So I had a nice opportunity while I was still in college. Once I graduated, I landed a job as a practice manager for an eating disorder practice, and I was there for 7 or 8 years. And it's still a topic that very much fascinates me. And I did a presentation actually recently at HealthCon on eating disorders that was pretty well received. Once I got into the healthcare business in mental health, I realized after a period of time I needed a change. And so I went to work for a community hospital in their billing department, which was a little bit of a downward move, but I kind of wanted to think about what was out there in the world of healthcare and whether or not this was kind of what I wanted to do. So while I was working as a biller, I had an opportunity position opened up in coding. I didn't even know what a coder was. Didn't have any idea what they did. But one of the first things on my first day that the woman that trained me said is that coding is one of those fields that if you learn it well, and take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. You have no idea where this will take you. And I always think back, when I was asked to be on the advisory board and when I was on the chapter association board of directors and have done other activities and work for AAPC, she wasn't kidding, because I never could have imagined a career in the way that I've had on that very first day as a coder, that I didn't even know what I was going to be doing. So they taught me E&M and they taught me coding. I sat for my exam and moved my way up to coding manager. And then I managed the team of coders for both sides of the house, the facility and the professional side. I had a team of auditor and educators. I had, for a brief time, a team of documentation improvement specialists. So I've had an opportunity to work a big piece in revenue cycle with a focus on coding and compliance. And it has been a fabulous career.
And what is your role now?
I currently work for Maine Health, which is a health organization in Portland, Maine. There are, I believe, 12 facilities, 9 hospitals, largest organization in Maine and in northern New England. And my title is Manager of Regulatory Billing Compliance. So essentially, my team and I manage all of the internal compliance reports from a billing and a revenue cycle perspective for all of the hospitals and other facilities. We have a nursing home, we have home health at the Maine Health Corporation. So it's been, moving from a pro-fee coder to being able to do this kind of work facility-wide has been really, really interesting. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't learn something, because you just can't know it all.
Yeah. And how does AAPC fit into this journey where it sounds like you had started this path and found AAPC later? Is that true?
That is true. And actually, when I was first coding, they had just started our local chapter that was in the area that I was working. It was the Seacoast Dover, New Hampshire chapter. They had just launched that. And I think it was 2 or 3 years actually before I got involved in going to the meetings. But as soon as I did, I realized that this would be an opportunity, not only to meet other coders in the area, but also to receive resources and to have the opportunity potentially to meet people from across the country. And so as time went by, I became more active in my local chapter. I served on the Chapter Association Board of Directors. I've participated in a number of projects that AAPC has asked for, as in my role in both the National Advisory Board and Chapter Association Board of Directors. And found that as I met people and broadened my scope of work, I had virtually a colleague or an acquaintance in every single field in the industry. And almost always when I'm faced with a question that I'm not really sure about, I can phone a friend. I have somebody that I can call that if they don't know the answer, they know somebody who will. And that has been probably as valuable as anything else that I have acquired during my career, that those relationships that I've gained at AAPC have made all the difference in the world.
Wow. Now it sounds like serving on the local level was really the catalyst that led you down serving nationally.
Absolutely. And I'm one of those people with the, that has to be a leader. And so, our local chapters really do struggle to find individuals, who will step in as officers. And I didn't mind doing that. But, I recognize the risk of having the same people do the same things over and over and over again. So I always encourage people, especially new coders who ask me, what do I do? Well, get involved in your local chapter, because it is a fabulous way, not only to meet people, to get your name out there, but actually to gain some, some leadership and managerial skills that, you might not think you need, but you probably do. So when I got involved early on, that really was the catalyst to bigger and better things. And the more I got involved in AAPC, the bigger and better my career grew.
It's fun to hear you talk about earlier. You mentioned just when you started down this path that you could never imagine that it would become what it has become. And you're a mentor to others, and people look up to you now and look to you for insight and guidance in their careers. And that has to be very fulfilling.
It is fulfilling. I think one of the things I'm most proud of are all of the staff that have worked with me over the years. I had a program for a while where I was able to hire coding apprentices and bring them in to do basic diagnostic coding and some charge entry back in the day when we still had that sort of thing. And to watch them learn from each other, support each other, become excited about their certifications and getting more certifications and learning more and cross-training. I have to say, without exception, everyone that I've had the opportunity to work with in this particular field have all been, the utmost in professionalism. And it's a source of pride for me to see individuals who worked for me early on going out and working in places, like Price Waterhouse, or working for large hospital organizations and having, really exciting roles, careers, and positions. It just, does my heart good. And like my friend told me, the woman that hired me, she, you don't know where this can take you. It can be a great second income, or it can be a career where you can make it an excellent living. And, I think you just need to decide where it is you fit, and know that there is a way out there to make those things happen for yourself if you just, trust your instincts and take any opportunity that comes your way.
I know the national office, the AAPC national office, has relied on your expertise in different capacities over the years. Are you involved in any committees or helping with education or anything now?
With AAPC, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I am on the education committee for HealthCon. So for all of the conferences, either regional or national, I work with Tori White and with a team of other coder, auditor, educator leaders in the industry. And we solicit and select speakers for HealthCon based on what our members have asked for, and also based on whether they've spoken before and how their scores were, and also based on what we see emerging in the industry as topics that we can't live without. So that's a big chunk of what I'm doing right now with regards to AAPC, but there have been other things that I've done as well.
Okay. Now tell us about the certifications that you hold, Pam.
I hold a CPC, which I got in 2003, I think. And then, I don't know, a handful of years later, I got the COC because I was working not only as a pro-fee coder, but also did a lot of coding and managing for my outpatient facility team. I will never sell myself as an inpatient coder. That is a skill set that I only know enough to be dangerous. But the two, the COC did give me some great overview of how facility coding and billing is done. And when I set for both of those, it was 5 hours and 45 minutes, I think, and it was the 150 questions. I don't think they switched the time, and they switched it again apparently until after I sat for both of those exams, and they are hard.
What one was the most difficult of those two?
I think the CPC for me was the hardest because I didn't know what to expect. I knew I wanted to pass the first time. I took the PMCC course, and it was in person, 16 weeks, with actually one of my mentors who I'm now fortunate enough to work with, Lori Desjardins. She taught me to code and she proctored my exam. So I had taken the 16-week course and studied, and actually my husband took the kids away for the weekend so that I could spend the whole weekend just kind of going over my books and rereading all of the guidelines and making sure I knew where everything was. I left there knowing I had done really well, but it was before we got scores. So I know I passed, but I don't know if I passed with a 70 or with a 92.
Yeah.
And the COC, I took a number of years later. I don't think I studied as hard, but I did take a boot camp, a one-day boot camp the day before I sat for the exam, because I sat for it in Vegas. And that one-day boot camp kind of filled in some of the blanks that I didn't realize I had missed. So I think any opportunity you have to take coursework, study tests, study guides, boot camps, any of that through AAPC is really the key to success. And I always encourage people to do that. If you're serious about passing that test, you have to, do the studying and do the work.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask you, what would you tell a future examinee, and really that just grasp onto anything that you can to learn what it's about?
Yeah, well, I think it goes without saying you have to have your anatomy, physiology, terminology really solid under your belt. You need to have those words and phrases in the front of your mind. The test isn't so much about knowing how to code as it is understanding the structure of the books and the basic guidelines for each area in both CPT and ICD-10, but also understanding the content of the HCPCS-2 book as well. There are multiple choice, meaning that two of the answers are totally ridiculous and the other two are really close. The key to passing those tests is knowing enough about those books to be able to find the correct information in order to select the answer that most closely matches the question. And there were some questions on both tests actually that I was able to answer right off the top of my head because I knew the rationale, I knew the answers. But when we're being asked about codes, simply going to the section in the CPT book and looking at the code description is almost always a guarantee that that language is going to point you to the correct answer. So it's not about being able to know that stuff, through rote memorization. It's knowing where to find that information in your book that is going to cause you to be successful in taking that examination.
Okay. Now, I bet, Pam, that you would have had a perfectly great career even without your APC certifications. And we see and we've learned that your membership in AAPC has helped you become a mentor and be seen as a subject matter expert, which you are. How did your certification or certifications help you professionally?
Well, one way was that in my organization, that certification was a requirement. So what I'm finding and what I hold with my own team is that there must be at least one certification in place in order to even apply for any of the jobs in my department. And actually, I believe also for any of the jobs in the coding departments throughout all of Maine Health. And I know other hospitals and medical practices expect the same. And also including potentially other specialty certifications like CPMA or the medical specialty in which the coder will be working in order to make sure that they have that level of expertise. So, I mean, needing to have the certification was actually one factor, but, the requirement to keep up that certification through education was, for me, an opportunity to go to the conferences. I was fortunate enough in all of my work to have a decent education budget, and so almost always was able to go to either national, if they were on the East Coast, or regional conferences in order to get that information. I'm not a great online learner. find it really difficult to stay focused. So for me, being in person, being able to network, being able to go up and speak to the speakers after their presentations, being able to be in the room with people who are having the same questions and problems that you are with the same kind of coding scenarios is so invaluable. And without the certification, I wouldn't have needed the education and wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to the conferences, which I tell anyone, I don't care if you have to forego a vacation, it's totally worth it if you're, sincere about your career and you're serious about, moving ahead. It's money well spent and opportunity of a lifetime, I think, if you get the chance to go even at least just once.
All right. So yeah, we have conferences all over the US, national, and we typically have 2 regionals, and you have definitely had experience at those, and a great energy at our conferences.
Yes, they are. And I'm always surprised to see how big they are, especially the in-person ones. Certainly before COVID, they're a little less, but the hybrid model has made it a lot easier for individuals to get that conference experience without actually having to get on a plane, which for most of us is generally required. So I hope that continues. I think it's a great way to bring that effort and education to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to attend. But I really am looking forward to Denver because I want to see people in person again.
That's right. That's right. Well, just going back to how certifications have helped you, was there a time early in your career before you received your first AAPC certification that the industry maybe didn't seek certification so much, and then as you got into the early 2000s, it became more necessary?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't like change, then healthcare is not the place for you. And as time goes by, this business of healthcare is becoming far and far more complicated. It's expensive for small private practices, to stay solvent. And one of the things I noticed fairly early on in my career was that a lot of private practices expected their coders to have the specialty certification because they knew that if they didn't, they were at financial risk. It used to be years ago, even when I first started working, that you really could hire somebody who was reasonably smart to go work in your back office and get your claims out. And that was, back in the early 90s when before even AAPC and before quotas were actually a thing. But over time, and each year when the proposed rules come out, I think, how am I ever going to learn all of this? And how am I ever going to keep it all straight? And I think healthcare organizations and their executives have realized that certification is a must. The bottom line really depends on people with the expertise that we gain through AAPC is the catalyst for a decent bottom line. And without that, our organizations are at risk. And so the expectation is that, if you're going to hire somebody in your revenue cycle, they need to be certified.
Okay. Now, Pam, we've spoken a lot about students and this starting point for people in their careers. How about those who already have established careers, but they're maybe looking for that right niche for them? You've had a lot of different roles. You mentioned that you have friends in just about every facet in the business side of healthcare. And I'm sure there might have been a time or two where you're like, oh, I accepted this position and maybe it's not what I love. How would you recommend an experienced coder to find that specialty that resonates with them?
Well, I think one of the most helpful things a coder can do is to try to expose themselves to other arenas in healthcare. So it used to be when you landed a job, you stayed there for the duration. You know, you went to work, you know, when you were 18 and you left when you were 65 with your gold watch, and that was how it was done. That's no longer an expectation in healthcare. In fact, I think I read recently is that the average tenure is about 2.5 years. And so more and more employers are not expecting their staff to, you know, to spend their lives working for them. And so it's not unreasonable after a year or two to say, you know what, this might not be for me. And it's okay to make those kinds of moves. Now, moving from one type of specialty into another is probably most easily done if you're in a hospital setting, because you often can have the opportunity to you know, job shadow or, you know, volunteer to be cross-trained. I think that if somebody is coming from a totally different industry, like for example, you know, they might be working in retail and decide that, gee, you know, this, I've seen these ads for medical coding and billing. I wonder if this is something for me. I always encourage people, you know, to do their research, to make sure that they understand what they're going to get if they're going to pay for coursework and classes and what the expectation is. I encourage them to look at the job opportunities, to talk to people in the field. I've had many people call me and email me over the years asking me that very question. I think I want to be a medical coder. What do you think? And so as much as I love and enjoy having new coders join the field, I also don't ever want to give anybody bad advice. And so what I say is make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. It's a sedentary job. And so for somebody who's on their feet all the time and, you know, it likes a busy environment, it might not be for you, because many of us are seated right here for an 8-hour day and then some. I also talk a little bit about, you know, often it's difficult to get a coding job right out of the gate. So be prepared to look at other areas in the revenue cycle where you might gain some experience to get your foot in the door. I've also had questions from people with babies and children who think that this might be an opportunity to work from home. But I always explain is that, yeah, you know, you would likely have the opportunity to work from home, particularly in this environment, but you will likely be held to accuracy and productivity standards. And so you'll need to be able to figure out how you can do that. And at the same time, you know, provide for childcare if you have to do that. And so a lot of those conversations that I have with people are eye openers, but I would rather somebody come into the industry with their eyes open and have a good start to a great career than to be, you know, to dive in head first and then get incredibly disillusioned and angry when they find out that, you know, it's not quite what they had hoped.
Yes, yes. Well, what area of the revenue cycle excites you the most? You may not even be doing it now. Is there something that you're just like, I cannot stop reading about this. I love it. It's one of my favorite things.
I've always enjoyed teaching physicians, and that's not something that I do quite so much anymore. You know, I provide the recommendations and the regulatory guidance to the people who teach the physicians, and they develop their own education plans. But I really did enjoy doing that. I did it for quite some time, fairly early in my career. I like the compliance piece of it. I like reading the regulatory guidance. I know I'm a ginormous nerd, but that's okay. But I enjoy when somebody comes at me with a question, can we do this? And just going out to, you know, the different sources, you know, the Code of Electronic Federal Regulations, or going to the Medicare sites, or, you know, the Medicaid sites, and looking for coverage determinations and guidance with regards to, can we do this or not? And what is the best way to do this? And what is the compliant way to do this? So that research piece is kind of what I like to do right now. I do a lot of it.
It seems like that's a trend. Coders, they love to investigate and be in information. And as you mentioned before, it's always evolving. So you kind of have to be that way.
Yeah, you do. CMS changes their mind every couple of weeks, and then certainly at the end of every year, the Federal Register is published with all of the changes related to inpatient, outpatient, and physician services, with pages and pages of discussion that is incredibly interesting, but most of us just do not have the time to read that from cover to cover. So we kind of pick out what we believe is going to be of interest or need for us to know, and then we go from there. But yeah, there's no lack of information out there. You just need to know where to find it and know what is reliable.
Okay. What does Pam like to do when she's not in her career, not in medical coding and work?
Oh, so what do I do outside of work?
Yes.
I'm actually a stained glass artist.
Oh, wow. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you get into stained glass
I get
artistry?
into that. I had always been interested in glass. I always liked to watch the glass blowers at the state fair. And I thought, glass as an art medium was just fascinating to me. And I always liked stained glass windows and stained glass, pictures and things that I saw in craft shops. But my local high school actually offered one year a class in stained glass. I think it was a 6 or 8 week course at my local high school. I was tickled to death because I couldn't believe my fortune. So I took the class and learned some of the basics. And then that evolved into my, just visiting different glass studios, talking to the artists, learning the techniques. YouTube has been a wonderful resource. And even though I've been doing this, 15 or 20 years, I always learn something new, kind of like coding. You learn something new every day. And I enjoy doing flat panels. I don't care for three-dimensional artwork, but I do a lot of flat panels. I tend to lean towards either geometrics or fantasy pieces, fairies and dragons and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's been a great hobby. And I do that I have a studio at our house in Maine. And then I'm actually in Florida right now, where we have a very small little winter home. And here I go fishing. I fish.
All right.
Yeah. So
like big fish, when I think of Florida fishing, I see people with like swordfish and all these big crazy things.
yeah, I've not pulled anything that big out of the water. We fish the Indian River, which is we're right next to the Sebastian Inlet. So it's the intercoastal waterways. We're in between Cocoa Beach and Vero Beach, actually. And so we fish the river, rarely go outside. And there's all kinds of variety of fish in there. And I've not caught anything any bigger than maybe 12, 15 inches. But there are some big fish there, and hopefully I'll get one of these times.
Yeah, well, sounds like a relaxing hobby, just you and your husband.
It's a great hobby. You're outside, and it's just a really good hobby, and it's not just for men. Fishing is for women.
Well, tell me about your stained glass art. Is that something that you sell?
I've commissioned some of it. One of the reasons I don't like to sell my glass or commission pieces is that a lot of times people will come to me with an idea that I just go, oh, I don't want to do that, or I don't think this will translate well. And I'll sometimes say, here's what I can do, and here's what you're going to have to live with. Because a lot of times people will come to me with designs that have lots and lots of little pieces, and that's really not what stained glass is. Stained glass is using bigger pieces, and the glass textures and colors suggests the detail. So I often don't offer to do pieces for people. I usually will do a piece every year for the 2 local chapters that I'm involved with to raffle, either at their May Mania or at their conferences. I give a lot of pieces away for family members for holidays and things like that. So yeah, it's not really a business, because then I'm worried it might become dreary to do. It's a hobby, so I do it because I love it.
making everything a business can take the fun out of things sometimes.
That's what I'm afraid of. And so, I have sold pieces, but they're pieces that I have made and said, this is for sale if you want it. Otherwise, I'm just gonna hang it up.
All right. Well, Pam, thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure.
Telling us a little bit about yourself. And if you haven't read her article yet, visit or read your latest Healthcare Business Monthly, the May 2022 issue. You can find that on the AAPC website, or many of you have that mailed to you. And so take a look and read about Pam. And Pam, one last question. If for someone who is considering this career path, what would you tell them? What kind of words of encouragement would you give them?
I would encourage anyone who wants to enter this field and make this a career that they never dreamed of by making sure that every opportunity, no matter how minor or insignificant it might seem, to take advantage of that. So even if you're asked to sit in on a special project or do another type of work, or maybe fill in for somebody and it's something that you might not think is your job or anything that would interest you, do it anyways, because the more you know, the more effective you'll be, and the more insight you'll have with regards to this particular industry. And I think that if you try to be the best coder, biller, whatever it is that you do that you can be, only good things will follow.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pam. Pam, you hang on with me just for a minute. For
Sure.
those watching, you can listen to Pam tell her story on the AAPC podcast. Just go to your favorite podcast app and search for the AAPC podcast. And you can listen to Pam as you're gardening or doing chores around the house and hear her story and many other inspiring stories and you might just pick up something that leads you to your next path in your journey in healthcare. Pam, thanks again, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Alex.